about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, bought a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my top niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosure Vic homes out the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa, thanks baby, you made me a billion, plus I own a building for each one of my children's children.
We are live. It's this time of the week again, and man, has it been a long week when it comes to what's happened in the Voice of Rebellion community. I'd rather not get too much into details what's happened on the scene, but behind the scenes of the show. It is 9 o'clock Eastern. It is 6 o'clock Pacific time. This is your host, Chris J., and this is from last week. You're not going to be seeing the other co-host I had for a long time, and I know it's going to upset some of the Voice of Rebellion radio fans, but I'm just going to put it this way, is that he quit on his own, and so there's that. I didn't fire him, though I will not accept him crawling back to the network, even if he was to apologize for what the stunt he has pulled to us, and he is gone. And if I catch him using the Voice of Rebellion name, and if he thinks that's his name of the radio to use, that's not. I came up with the name. I came up with the logo. Jules has been kind enough to make the banners. Really owns none of the. I know there's no trademarking. There's nothing official, but I'm saying it would just be stealing from somebody that he was very disrespectful to on the last day of our business partnership, I could say. And, just wanted to put that out there, is that if you see, Al Shores does not have the Voice of Rebellion legacy to his name. That's me. And now we're adding one more, and hopefully maybe one more down the road. But now I do have a co-host and a studio man all the way from the Garden State. That is Dylan Wade is right here in the studio with me for tonight's show about private prison complex and FEMA camps, and we're also talking about the United States government targeting dissidents via many different ways on tracking them. We have the fusion centers where pretty much have created almost a network of secret police in everybody's communities, from very small communities to larger communities. These fusion centers are a combination of many different law enforcement, from the DHS to the FBI to the police to state police. It's definitely a kind of secretive law enforcement, and a kind of a very resemblance of secret polices and what Americans think of when they think of dictatorships in the past. Germany, the Dominican Republic, during Trujillo, which was a United States-supported dictator, by the way. And many other countries that have had known secret polices. Under Stalin, he used the NKVD, which was the state intelligence services, as kind of that. And then there's also different targeted groups, and many groups have been put on higher priorities, even by race, ethnicity, and religions. That have been put at a higher priority by the government, even with no prior things to put a prejudice on a person. Just by that, they have put different. The United States government, even in documents, and up to recent times, have put even people of color, African Americans, at a higher priority simply just because they're African American. And it is ironic that we do have a half African American, well, half African, half white president, but of course he is just a puppet. Really, if you ask the real civil rights activist like Colonel West, this guy is no different than any president that's ever been since JFK, just another Rockefeller super rich puppet that we have right there at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And, we are talking about that. We're talking about, it's kind of just a broad topic. And I thought that may bring in, I actually already had this topic in mind about the private prison system, but I just elaborated and made it more broader because of the recent event that happened over the week. And I kind of would rather, I would like to do a show about this and do a show devoted to one topic, but at the same time, I would like to, bring the fact that this is a new era of Voice of Rebellion Radio. I think it's going to be a lot less turbulent, especially for me personally, outside of Voice of Rebellion Radio, when it comes to dealing with this radio business. And I think definitely on the air, be a lot more respectful between the co-hosts. I've actually worked with this guy, Dylan Wade, before. It wasn't really a very long working partnership, but we were back when I worked on my first station, NWO Truth Radio. I know it's like I'm talking about I've had a very long, illustrious radio career going back years. Well, this actually has been almost 2 years ago. When I was working at NWO Truth Radio, Dylan Wade was actually even younger than me. He's only 16 now. But at that time, he was being trained kind of under my show that I had only been 8 shows into. And then there was a guy, James Impendi, that kind of brought him on to be trained, decent radio host and Brandon Council. Both, I would say, in credit kind of, for now when I think about all the stuff that's happened on the radio, and it's kind of like what's happened this week has made me reflect on what, the whole experience of radio. And there's been a lot of more experience in those 100, well, not even 100, 90 episodes or so of this show and all the little side projects I've done than I would think that anybody would have had in 2 years, with going through a few different co-hosts, including this one that I went through for over a year. He was my co-host. And now, but I have a lot to credit to, Brandon Council and James Impendi for getting me started in radio. And I think Dylan Wade has kind of a similar people to thank. Dylan, welcome to Voice of Rebellion Radio. Welcome to working with me, and we interview all kinds of cool people here. I mean, we just about 2 months ago interviewed the USS Liberty survivors. We interviewed a rap activist that's based out of St. Pete, Pedro El Poeta. So you're definitely get to interview a lot of cool people here, definitely, and we have a lot of cool callers here at UCY. We have a lot of cool people in the UCY community. Definitely, Dylan, I think it's going to be a good experience here. You're going to have, anyways, I'm going to start talking, about the private prisons. The first thing I wanted to bring up is that, people don't realize that in this country, we have the biggest prison population, bigger than China, bigger than Russia, bigger than any large countries that you could think of in your mind. It's bigger than a lot of I think a few of the top countries that are not the United States combined. And we have something like 1 or 2% of our population behind bars. A good 50% of them, I think, are for non-violent drug offenses. And a lot of them, and you get even to, probably a good quarter or so is probably for marijuana charges. Something that's been deemed harmless by scientific studies, and is definitely has medical benefits. Is definitely not it's definitely no more dangerous than alcohol. In fact, it's way further safer, and people are being thrown away left and right. And it's part of the reason is the private prison system. And these are the people that lobby for marijuana reform not to happen, for people not for it not to be legalized, for and for it to continue not even to be decriminalized, where people, at least with a decriminalization, nobody would go to jail for it anymore, but there could still be fines, which that's why I don't really agree with decriminalization. Some people think that's a good enough step. I think that's not far enough. I think that deregulation altogether, making it consider what it is, a plant, even though that does have, simply enough, it can get you high, but it is a plant. I think they should be treated as a plant, as it's something that grows on nature, and it's not like other drugs that you have to refine them to get to the point that where they're, how people consume them. But private prison complex, there's thousands and thousands of prisoners in the United States that are under one corporation, Corrections Corporation of America, which runs many of these private prisons, and inside of them they have practically a modern legalized version of slavery going on, where prisoners are working for very little money or no money at all as terms of their imprisonment, and they are forced to make products, it's not like they're just making, like I think some people think that they're busting rocks or or something like that, that they're not really doing any real work or that could actually get anybody profit. But no, they're making T-shirts, they're making stuff that it's labor that somebody's profiting off of, and these people that run these prisons, they're getting subcontracts. As people in industries subcontract labor out to these practically legalized slavery prisons that they have, and even if there are people that are in those prisons and they deserve it, but I don't think that anybody should be making profit off of prisoners, because an extreme conflict of interest starts to develop, and a lot of these people don't deserve to be in prison.
The other thing. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say one last thing is that I don't think very very few countries allow profit to be made off of prisoners, because the simple fact is that when profit is made off of prisoners, these private prisons have lobbyists that can make sure that the politicians, they keep the politicians' pockets rich with money. The politicians do not want to shut down the private prisons, and in fact, they make laws to help the private prisons that could send more prisoners their way. And in the states that have the private prisons, seems to be the states that have the least chance of any future legalization or any real drug reform to end the bogus war on drugs. Louisiana, for example, is very far away from legalization of marijuana. Bobby Jindal would never allow it. Nobody in the Louisiana state government would ever allow it, and the Louisiana people, they're one of the most most affected towards the programming against marijuana on the TV. And that's also the state that has the most private prisons. And that's why in the South they have a lot of private prisons, and you see no decriminalization, no legalization of any kind in any of the states. Barely even allow medical marijuana in any of the states. While it's a direct correlation, and I think that private prisons are not even brought to light that much. They don't even. I think people in America don't even realize that they exist. And I think that all that labor, all that profit that would be made is going. They don't think there's profit being made, and they think that labor, is profitless, and that all these prisons are ran by the state where the labor is being done, which would still not be any better. But I'm just saying is that they don't realize it's literally corporations with these giant special interests are there to make money off of the imprisonment, incarceration of not just people. They also seem to, we have the disproportionate amount of blacks and Hispanics in this country, and both of them only make up about 25 to 30% of the country's population, and they make up 60 to 80% of the prison population. And again, it's not like these people are doing serious crimes. They're not breaking into people's houses. They're not damaging their property. They're not hurting anybody. Most of these people got caught selling dimes on the street, possibly just trying to feed their family. or, may just make money, make side money. But again, it is a victimless crime, and nobody deserves to be thrown in a cage for the selling, or even, worse, the using of marijuana should never, it's atrocious. That's considered a crime in the United States, considering that many countries, very few countries have made that, or that have kept that a law to this day. They might have laws on selling it, but they do not, usually countries do not throw people in prison for the using of marijuana, or even the using of drugs in general. Usually, a lot of countries have moved towards the rehabilitation of these people rather than the criminalization of these people. Almost like this demonization of drug users, not realizing that they are sick, not criminals. They are sick as in it's a mental illness, but not, they're not malicious criminals, as almost are painted in the United States. The whole wrong mindset that's been painted in the United States about these people.
It's been a cultural thing for at least 100 years. At least 100 years. It's totally cultural. I mean, you wouldn't have this problem, I think, if 80% or 90% of the country was with you. But there's an entire region that still is afraid of it because of the extensive programming that's been going for 100 years.
Well, yes, this, when you talk about marijuana, it was before, it's not only something that was, it was illegal and not accepted. It was accepted and it was not illegal. It was, it was considered medicine up till around the 1920s, and then the 1920s they started classifying it as, poison, and stuff like that. They were trying to say that it was in the 30s they really went hard on the campaign. They started saying that this would make people mad. Most of these campaigns were actually racial motivated, and try to make it seem like this would enable black men, to literally in the movie Reefer Madness, which was, people think it's almost like a comedy nowadays. That was a legitimate propaganda film in 1937. The movie depicts black men raping white women because of the influence of marijuana, which is just absurd. I think nobody really sees that as legit nowadays. But I'm saying that's where the roots started from. So it is pretty hard to deprogram from a culture that actually believed that. And, the reason it was made illegal, the guy who pushed the campaign towards legalization, and there's now many reasons why it's kept illegal, but the main reason it was made illegal was its industrial benefits of the non-drug part of it, which was hemp, which could replace paper as, paper from trees, that William Randolph Hearst had a stronghold over the lumber industry at the time. So it was in his best interest to demonize the thing that could possibly put him out of business. And just to also remind you, William Randolph Hearst wasn't just a small or businessman. This guy was a very, very powerful, rich man. That's why he was able to do what he did. And literally, the whole attitude is crazy. From early 1900s, it was medicine. It was, accepted medicine, and then 30 years later, it's poison. It's the whole attitude in America shifted so quickly, and in many countries nowadays, we have still this stigma about marijuana to this day, even though that some states have legalized it. There's still the federal government effort to try to de-legalize it, de-legalize it. They're trying to illegalize it again. Despite the states legalizing it, it seems like the federal government are trying to re-legalize in these states, and they're doing stuff like saying that, making phony reports about deaths in these states associated to that in the news, in the mainstream news, which not putting in other factors that these people, I think that there might be a slight bit of a legitimacy as that maybe they were under the influence of them, but they died from totally unrelated things. Just them being. It's like what people say is that if you're, if you're a stupid person before smoking weed, you'll be a stupid person after. But if you're not a stupid person before smoking, you'll still not be a stupid person after. It doesn't do anything. But sometimes people blame weed for what stupid people do on weed when it's not the weed. It's just that the person was stupid and did something stupid. That's why I think that the Colorado, what happened was these phony reports that were put out. And again, it's partial to the culture. Again, the stigma has been left over, and the whole war on drugs. I mean, it goes back to people think that Americans almost want to see a victory in this war on drugs. They think that eventually the streets could be drug free. When they don't realize their own government imports the hard drugs into this country. If you look back in the 80s, the whistleblowers reported that crack cocaine was being put into underclass, most predominantly black neighborhoods, in order to destabilize the movements of the Black Panthers during the 70s, who had gained strength. And that was a tactic, like they used COINTELPRO to infiltrate these movements. Was another thing that they did, was import crack into the neighborhoods. The whistleblower the whistleblower that put this eventually killed himself, in quotations, because his career, they mocked him after it. That's what they said, is that because he was mocked and he lost his career over it, that eventually killed himself. But I don't think that he killed himself. I think the government killed him for whistleblowing. The name does not come to me, but he was talking about the L.A. Hood.
They did a movie about him.
Yeah, there is a movie about him, and he's a well-known whistleblower from that time. And there wasn't the only drug trafficking that the United States government was doing. There was a big giant drug operation going from South America all the way, pretty much they were running all the way up to the United States during the 80s. Was the Contras. The Contras were being funded with the drug money, and these were a ultra right-wing paramilitary terror group that was marketed as rebels. Sounds kind of familiar to some of the Middle Eastern things that are going on right now, including Syria, but that's a whole different story. But these rebels, in quotations, that were fighting against a democratically elected government in the United States, funded with the cocaine money, and they were also drug traffickers that trafficked the drugs through Central America all the way, and then the United States government funding Mexican drug cartels. And this was almost the weird thing is that this is almost like a side story to the whole Iran-Contra scandal. It's almost like people forgot about that part at least, that there was the cocaine trafficking element in there, and that was the only drug. That's the only drug trafficking. Didn't stop then, or didn't start there. I mean, in the 70s, there was reports that the United States government were bringing in opium from Vietnam in the caskets, supposedly. I mean, it's pretty morbid, but they put in the caskets supposed dead soldiers. There were no soldiers in there, obviously, just drugs. And then they would bring it home, and the United States government was profiting off of these, off the opium that they would later refine into heroin. Probably weren't even bringing it home. I bet some of it was probably being sold to some of the countries that use it more, especially in some of the West European countries. They tend to use that a little bit more. And then nowadays, there's that. I mean, look at Operation Fast and Furious. What that had to say is that, Eric Holder, the head of the Department of Justice, I call him the Department of Injustice, he was complicit, along with Barack Obama and the United States government, in sending guns to Mexican drug cartels that were in Mexico. And they said that this the only thing they could cover themselves with is that they were saying this is a program on how to catch Mexican drug cartels, and they're going to track the guns, which does not seem very consistent with other reports about what actually happened there. And it's considering that their past, they were definitely trafficking. Another thing that's worth noting is that in Mexico there's this common sentiment that kind of a trifecta of trifecta of forces were responsible for the 43 kidnappings of students that were protesting against the Mexican government. The Mexican government, is very corrupt, like the United States government. The United States government supports the Mexican government. Mexican government, a lot of evidence that they support the drug cartels in Mexico. They all, work together, and those drug cartels, along with the help of Mexican and United States government, kidnapped those students, and they all, unfortunately, were murdered afterwards. What looked to be just a mass crackdown of dissident in Mexico, where they have a very large they have a bigger revolutionary movement than the United States does. So I think the U.S. government, they really didn't want to see Mexico's government, fall to someone more revolutionary and have a country that opposes D.C. right there at the border. And we got a little bit off track, but it all ties in also together, because at the same time, and I put in the description, we're going to talk about FEMA camps a little bit. Rex 84 was an immigration-related / FEMA bill that was introduced in the 80s. Rex 84 said that if an overflow of immigrants happened, I think that they would be, along with ICE, the Immigration Authority, they would be housing these immigrants in these FEMA residential centers. However, these residential centers have actually been built, as we saw, and they were built the last 10 years or so, and they were not very residential looking. In fact, they looked a lot more prison looking. They have barbed wire fences surrounding, and they even have signs saying that no person that can bring in anything that could help them escape. Now, why would you not be allowed to escape if this is supposed to be a lending hand? And now when FEMA talks about them, it's no longer about immigration, but they're talking about as in the fact of as a disaster relief. If a major disaster was to happen, that they would send people there. But it does not correlate, considering what actually the bill stated that was, passed between that was passed in D.C. There's a bill that's, I think, was like HR. It was a certain part of a bill, but it says right there that this is to be the house dissidents that and other troubled groups would be sent to these camps, and they call them residential centers, but they're called FEMA camps, FEMA prison centers. Really, what they should be called. And at the same time, they make these camps not just to house just a few people, but these camps could altogether, there's 800 of them estimated in the United States. They could house a total of millions, tens of millions possibly of people could be thrown in these camps. Then they have multiple per state. I mean, I looked it up. In Florida, they have 3 of these such camps, and they put them along with. And the weird thing is, just like the German predecessor to this idea of throwing mass different groups that were considered undesirable by the government, they have them all on train tracks. Amtrak trains take them right to these camps. And again, if you want more information on this particular part on it, about the FEMA camps and the fusion centers, I really just took it from the Jesse Ventura show on this, where he does a special. And let me remind you is that, yes, Jesse Ventura had a show on TV, Jesse Ventura Conspiracy Theory, but this was the one show. This is what he really plucked the nerve here, because this is the one show that was actually banned and was never allowed to be re-aired on TV. It was the one where he talks about the FEMA camp and the police state that we are now experiencing in the United States. Talk about fusion centers like I was talking about earlier. FEMA camps are very real. They're to regular Americans, to regular, unfortunately, the word be used here, sheeple. They just think you're insane when you talk about it. They think that you're paranoid. They think you're crazy, but they haven't done their research, and they haven't looked at what they're actually, what actually the politicians are saying, what the politicians are planning, and they don't realize that that all this stuff has really, in just a few years, came together where, the stuff that I think might have been planted before has became reality of, ever since using the 9/11 ploy to justify all this stuff. It's the Patriot Act, NADA. People don't even realize what NADA means. NADA means that anybody could be thrown in jail with no charges, just if you're considered a threat to national security, but they don't have to bring you on any official charges. Now, what could be deemed as a threat to national security? According to how the United States government talks, people doing radio like us could be deemed threats to national security. People, people that call for a boycott of the Israeli government, boycott of Israeli goods. Because it's considered, they could be considered a threat to national security. Anything. There's so many things that could be. It's a catch-all thing. I think that when we hear, NADA really should have woke Americans up. It was signed on January 1st, 2012, and now it's almost been 3.5 years, and I haven't seen that out of many people. They've been woken up, and they think I'm insane. They think that I'm crazy for talking about the stuff as much as I do. I actually would like to hear, because from my personal experiences, down here in Florida, it's been pretty bad. I mean, not very few people. The only people that really listen to what I have to say might be some older folk, that are 50 or so that I run into, and then sometimes I'll go into a little bit of political discussion that might actually agree with some of the points I have to say. But, what's your experience up there in New Jersey? If you've even tried to bring up, these topics.
It's largely the same. I mean, there's really not going to be a whole lot of difference. I think that the law is written far too broadly to really nail down any definition. It just comes down to the executive's discretion. I mean, whatever they think it is, and that's scary, considering what we've seen around the world in the past 100 years.
Well, yeah, it's weird how history's repeated itself. A lot of the same storylines almost have repeated themselves, and what I mean by that is that we have, back in Germany, which is not very surprising when I get into history about it in about a few minutes. In Germany, if you were to say that various corporations, along with the German government at the time in 1933, if you were to start saying that they were going to, conspire to throw Jews, throw many different groups into concentration camps, dissidents, socialists, whatever the German government posed as a threat to the Nazi government, thought that posed a threat to them. If you were to say that they were going to do this mass roundup and they were going to kill that many people and that they were going to start a world war that would involve the United States and the Soviet Union, they would have called you mad. They probably would have thrown you in a psychiatric institute, knowing how things were in Nazi Germany, and they would have called you conspiracy theorist over all those things. I mean, it would have been almost a very, very similar reaction, maybe a little bit more extreme, but probably very similar would have been if you were to say that in 1933. I think nowadays, I think we're further than 1933. I think we're in 1930 something of this U.S. downfall, towards. I think we're getting very close to World War when you see the situation that's going on in the Middle East, United States encroachment on Syrian sovereignty, and the economic events that have happened just this month, really. When you see the stock market crumbling like this, and other stock markets around the world crumbling like this, what looks to be happening is a restructuring, and that's what happens. And the thing that people really hate to realize is that, people that are middle class, upper middle class, to invest in the stock market, I don't think the working class really has a chance to invest in the stock market, but I think a lot of the middle class, they try their best a little bit, try to make some money off of it. They're the only ones that lose. The super rich don't lose. They know the game too well, and the thing is that it's pretty easy to know the game you made the rules to. And the super rich made Wall Street. They make the rules to Wall Street, and they make, in the long run, they'll be richer while everybody has to suffer the economic bubble that's coming up in the next few months. I mean, some people really don't see us getting out of this year without some major economic event happening.
I think they want to keep it going as long as possible.
Well, yeah, I think that's why they're going to restructure. The restructuring, I think what's a couple things that are going to happen economically with the United States is that they're going to eventually they're probably that Ameridollar that's been proposed for a while. I mean, that was proposed probably like 10 years ago. I think they're waiting to see what happens. For one thing, they're going to have an election north of the border in about 2 months. Unless some extraordinary circumstance happens, then somebody that doesn't support DC and doesn't go with the DC agenda doesn't get somebody that doesn't support all that gets elected. Well, then they'll have a different way of going about it. But if just things go as they expect in Canada, and if the things unless the Mexican president's overthrown, as the way it is, Harper and Peña Nieto south of the border would be very supportive of this Ameridollar concept. The Ameridollar would come with a restructuring, and then during this whole bubble that would be happening would probably be the time to be opportunistic for them, and they would make the Ameridollar. But the Ameridollar, what would happen is during that, was that people would suffer while the economy is reset, and while it's reset, though, they continue to get richer. And in the long run, it would be a way to, I guess, continue the crumbling petrodollar, and it's called the petrodollar for a reason. It's not backed by anything but what the Federal Reserve bankers have to say it's backed by, and what the commodities it's traded in. And it's being traded in less and less commodities around the world because I think a lot of the governments around the world are getting sick of what DC has done. They're sick of the wars, and they're not going to help them out by trading their currency. And really, the Federal Reserve dollar should not be called the United States dollar, because it's really just an international collusion of bankers. I mean, the Rothschilds don't have really a lot of connection to the United States. They're just they have a lot more connection to Britain, but in reality, they don't have a connection to any nations. They just are the puppet masters that are behind the scenes controlling many different leaders, and they don't really have a home. But the truth is that they're trying to make the whole world their domain. They're the secret rulers. But the Federal Reserve, it's just a banker's note, and it doesn't. The American people do not benefit from it being existing. In fact, they've suffered greatly from existing. It's a private bank, and it's not like we used to actually have the American Treasury print our dollars. And then I could say that it was the United States dollar, but that was until 1913. Then Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act while everybody was distracted, and when that happened, signing the Federal Reserve Act started the bankers' complete control of the United States, and it started a passive inflation that now we have 20 to 40 times less our dollars are worth than they were worth in 1913. And really what it also means is the bankers have a complete ownership over the United States, because what happens with the Federal Reserve, the way it's structured, is that the United States has to pay for its money to be printed, and they charge us debt. They charge us for that, and then they put an interest, and it just keeps us in a perpetual way of more and more money we have to give to them, where it's not supposed to be ever paid back, because that's how they keep us in ownership. It's one of the biggest rackets that exist in the United States, and of course the bankers, again, this is how the Rothschilds, doing these kind of rackets, have been able to have so much power and have so much money. Literally trillions of dollars belong to this family. Well, not belong, they stole them. Trillions of dollars as a net worth between the entire family. And I wanted to put out the number, since we're about 40 minutes into the show, and I think it would be cool to have a discussion. I mean, I want to get back to the topic here. 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296. Call in here. This is Voice of Rebellion Radio. Chris Shea and Dylan Wade here. Talk about we kind of skimmed over the topics here for a little bit, but the private prison complex, again, it's still building and still been kind of kept in secrecy about the full extent, about the full, but really about all the effects they have. I mean, this is, there's a good chance that if you're sent to prison nowadays in this country, you're going to be sent to one of these facilities. Especially, definitely depending on what parts of the country you live. Louisiana has the most private prisons, that's in the country. So if you're sent to prison there's very good likelihood you can be sent to one of those facilities. And they have a lot in Florida, I think. They have a lot in the South. And they're really just popping up all over the United States. And it's one of those...
Christie's a big proponent of those.
You said Christie's trying to build those? And
he has. They're all over here.
Yeah, I would imagine Christie probably would be supportive of that because he is, I think all the governors across and all the major politicians are corrupt. He is just he's not just corrupt, he's a hypocrite on so many levels, this guy. And now this guy's running for president. It's interesting. I know he only has like 1 or 2% of the support of the country for a reason because everybody realizes how much of a hypocrite, talking about that, this guy, this guy's morbidly obese. He's literally spent, this is a real report came out that he spent almost $100,000, I believe, for food at sports games between him and his friends.
Yeah.
And this guy had the nerve.
In 4 years.
Yeah. I was just saying, what was this guy spending at each ball game? Was he going there? It's like, okay, I'm going to order 3 full-size subs. I'm going to have the 2 extra large fries, and the 64-ounce soda is not big enough. How about you get me a 128-ounce soda, and we'll see if I need another one. I think that
the guy's
Christie,
nuts.
Christie then will go and talk about, he talks about how pot users have no self-control. When this guy can't even, he needs all this money just to feed himself at sports games. This guy wants to he said that he would throw all pot users in for 10 years or something like that if he's elected.
Yeah, at least.
Which that is what that means, 10 years in a private prison, 10 years of labor that these, and of course, probably Christie's probably receiving, money right into his pockets from these private prison owners. And that also the industries that profit. There's, again, like I said, T-shirts and many other stuff that you wouldn't realize are built in these places. You gotta be careful what you're buying because you don't realize who you might be giving money to. These people make or practically get to make money or make extra money just because they use, de facto slave labor. And it's. I think that this is not an old. The thing is, this is not new. That's a pretty old concept. And if you look at history, back in Britain, they had similar things like this. In fact, the United States. I just thought of it. There might be bringing back debtors' prisons in the United States, meaning that if you have debts, probably this would mostly probably target credit card. People have credit card debts. And many other loans, from the banks that they have debt on. Credit card debt is very common in the United States. And the thing is that it's not really the people's fault. I know that a lot of people's first instinct is to say, well, these people didn't have the control to stop buying. Well, the thing is that a lot of these, that have terms and stuff that are not, that they try to conceal. And later they realize that it hurts them later and they're put into tremendous piles of debt are pushed on these people, and these people are thousands of dollars in debt. But the thing is that down the road, they might be putting these people in prison for that, like they used to do back in Britain and Europe 200 years ago. they're going to try to bring back to the United States. And in fact, I was hearing that Bank of America is actually going to start sending people to, usually they would just, usually these debt collectors are, will just call you at home. That'll usually be it. Usually that's all the debt collectors do. Now they're going to send physical people, not just to your house, but to your work. So when, you can be embarrassed, and they can go tell your job employers that you have this problem, and by telling your employers you might get fired, and it really turn your life upside down. And I really think that these people, what it is just that they're going to hire thugs to intimidate people at their jobs, and now with the debtors' prisons, again, the merger of corporate and state power in this country is becoming more and more prevalent, and it's becoming now into the law and the justice system. The whole law and justice system of America is now going to, has more traces of corporate influence in it now, where people could be sent solely for the crime of falling for the con artistry of these bankers and the way that they impose debt on people via credit cards and loans. And what extent is this going to be brought to? Some people, a lot of people can never pay off their loans for many different things. What if they fall behind on their, instead of maybe just foreclosing their house, they might add insult to injury and start doing this to people that have fallen behind on their home loans, or the loans to have opened up a business. And now with Main Street, United States, Wall Street's doing great. Main Street's not doing so great. That's what I mean by that. Small businesses all across the country are being either, really, there's only two options, it seems like nowadays, is to get bought up by some corporate interest or try your luck, and it's probably unlikely, but that you'll actually succeed. But nowadays, was due to the corporatization of the United States, you'll probably fail eventually. And most of these people rely on loans from somebody, and what is if they fall behind on those loans, I guess now they could they could be throwing these people in jail. There would be a lot of people affected, and it's it's really just it's like what Jesse Ventura was talking about, is that the elite is trying to turn this country, they're making this country more and more prisonish with each thing they do. It's kind of hard to believe that people actually some people actually support all these measures that are being done. They support, I think that ignorance is a part of it, but in some ways it's really just, it's false information, which is worse than ignorance, really. That these people have this propaganda that's been put in their mind, like with these anti-terror laws. They actually legitimately believe that if you are against these anti-terror laws, that you must be pro-terror, which is, these anti-terror laws have very little to do with actual terror. In fact, they have probably nothing to do with actual terror. Because, the United States government supports the real terror of, these groups in like Syria, these terrorist groups that are being funded by the United States government. Let's not forget how ISIS originally started. ISIS was the United States government-supported proxy in Syria against Bashar al-Assad. And it really has turned into the main Syrian rebel, quotation, rebel group, fighting along with the supposed moderates in Syria. And let me remind you that these moderates, in quotation, fight along with ISIS, and they do stuff like do chemical attacks. They do stuff like, they did, one of the most horrific things was the videotape of a Syrian rebel eating the Syrian army commander heart or was it liver, whatever it was, the organ of that man. Actually, the heart's not an organ, but it's not to get specific. The liver, I think it was, on TV, which is on video. That's horrific, or literally like what they've been shown. The Syrian rebels have been crucifying Christians that live in Syria, and they're actually a very large population of Syria. And under the Syrian government, they were considered as equals. But now, what the Syrian rebels plan to is that they plan to make that Syria like a Saudi Arabia, which, the Saudi Arabia enjoys a lot of support from the United States government, and this new Syrian Sharia state would probably enjoy a lot of support from the United States government. Again, these people, I guess, don't know all the backstories, and they don't realize that, the actual Al Qaeda and Taliban that, was actually propped up by the United States, and they were to fight the Soviets. The Mujahideen spawned off these groups in the 80s and 90s. And the Mujahideen started in the 70s and was funded originally by the Jimmy Carter government, later into the Ronald Reagan government. The United States government funded these people against the Soviets or the Soviet-friendly Afghani government. It was kind of considered a satellite state. It was a satellite state / ally of the Soviet Union. They sponsored these Islamists to rise up against them. And then after that, the Taliban government took over Afghanistan, which was later overthrown from power. And when they lost their power, now this kind of now it's pretty much the occupation state that's happened, with the United States government being still in Afghanistan to this day. They're still in Iraq, with paramilitary. In Afghanistan, still to this day, they're going to keep soldiers, I think, all the way up to 2024 still. Which means that once they're, and then imagine they'll probably put in another agreement, they'll keep them there even longer. They're probably permanently there, and this war is now going on 13, 14 years now. 13 or 14 years is just crazy. I mean, especially to somebody, teenagers in this country, all they remember is growing up during the same war. That's been their entire lives. And it's in this Middle East encroachment of sovereignty will continue. And it's going to continue in Syria. In Syria, this is definitely a result that the Syrian government is anti-Rothschild and anti-Zionist. So the United States government wants to overthrow Bashar al-Assad from power, and bring a puppet state there. And going back to how this all ties in with what's the topic of the show is that we Americans, they try to tell us that, again, the anti-terror laws, the many different laws that they've made is for our national security, when the supposed enemies are funded by the United States government. And then, of course, there was the ploy, the giant inside job that was done. It was inside job with the help of two other governments, Saudi Arabia and Israel. It was done in New York back. Now we're very close, actually, to the 14th anniversary. But what's that 9/11 fear that they put in everybody's minds? Which it wasn't a terrorist done job, because it was obviously a controlled demolition when towers fall at free fall speed, and when you have 45-degree cut beams at the bottom, and you literally see proofs of smoke come from lower floors as it slowly starts to crumble the building. That's an implosion. I mean, anybody that's worked with implosions would know. I mean, Jesse Ventura, again, he said that looked like an implosion, and he would know. He was a demolition expert back in when he was serving as a Navy SEAL in Vietnam. So he would know what an implosion looked like. And a lot of implosion experts, they literally have thousands of engineers, pilots, many different experts that could, that are there to say that that's not possible. It's not possible for jet fuel to burn at 1,800 degrees necessary for the building to collapse. because would take to melt steel beams. 1800 degrees, the fire would have not been that orangish fire that we saw on those tapes. It would have been a white fire, which we did not see. Also, another thing is that there was no luggage found in the World Trade Center when it collapsed and everything fell to the bottom. There was no people on the plane that they could positively identify. I know that it would be pretty hard for that part. There's no luggage. There was no plane wreckage. A screw or bolt was found there, nor the Pentagon. And the Pentagon was, the only person to walk through the hole where the plane supposedly hit, an employee at the Pentagon, she had to say that it didn't look like a plane had hit. In fact, that proved more that it looked like a missile, probably, or was set to hit it from the United States government to make it look like it was a plane. That maneuver that plane would have had to done to have completed the supposed story of the official 9/11 story would have been impossible practically for pilots of that expertise. Lacking that would have been, they'll have went for seconds within just a few feet of the ground without crashing and then hitting the Pentagon. Then where's the wing? Where do the wings go? It's just the one hole that they showed us. And then this is the most secured building on the planet, one of them at least, and all we see is an explosion. And we don't see a plane hit it. We just see that one picture of an explosion. It really looks like a bomb or missile. A missile could have hit it, but does not look like a plane hit it. So that's to just blow the lid off of and there's of course the 100 other coincidences that I will not get into, and I might just make a whole show into at some point. We do have a show, a Sunday show, 2 days after the anniversary this year. So I might just make a whole show to that, considering that this is something you can talk for hours and hours and hours once you've actually researched, seen it. If you see a few documentaries about it, there's 9/11 in Plain Sight, really good documentary. It's kind of dry though, I must say. It's not the most exciting film, really. It's kind of just a monotone narration, but it is a very informative film. So, and it is free for anybody that has Netflix, which is a lot of people have Netflix in the United States. So I think that it's good that it's on there. I think other documentaries kind of hard to find. That's easy to find. You just go to Netflix, look up that in the search bar, and then there it is. You don't have to try to look through YouTube. It's right there on Netflix. And if anybody wants to check out that film, because I already knew a lot of the stuff I knew about 9/11 before watching that film, but it did teach me some more stuff that I didn't even think there was more stuff for me really to know. That's how I would really have to research hard, but it was right there. And I hope it's still on Netflix anyways, but I can't believe we're almost at an hour into the show. We got quite a bit of information out there, and I would like to get a conversation about, I guess maybe this is just not one of those debatable topics. Like when we had that Ukraine show, we had like 5 callers that day, or even what was the show? Oh yeah, last week we had 1 or 2 callers on there probably, and just when it's topics are not so debatable, people don't want to. They just like to listen, hear the information, but going to the second hour, I think what I haven't talked about is and I think I put in the description is the United States government war on certain different groups of people, different ideologies, different religions, different races even. That the United States government has deemed a threat. I think most of us, we forget about the time back in the 1950s because we've been living and it's been so long from our, disconnected from our lives that only the people that were 70 or 80 could clearly remember that wave of fear and the wave of repression that they put on, people. They put on people that were communists in the United States via McCarthy and the Red Scare of McCarthyism. That people anybody that was believed to have belonged to communism was arrested and or released. They would question heavily, and you were tracked, and it was known. I mean, they would question all these people. They questioned Hollywood actors, and a lot of Hollywood actors would end up blacklisted, and we almost see the modern blacklist of the Hollywood actors to this day. Actually, it just belongs to the Israel question. If you oppose Israel, you'll be blacklisted, or openly oppose Israel at least, you will be blacklisted. I mean, Penelope Cruz has practically been blacklisted due to her support of Palestine. And there's other, you get demoted at least, and it is because Hollywood, in essence, is a propaganda machine. Actors in this country, it's more than it's more than just the supposed a talent that they have. It's carrying out an agenda, and you see recently all these war films. American Sniper is the one that comes to mind, because they really had a film that was very close to Nazi Germany, stole their nation, and just alarming. That Americans immediately fell in love with this movie. They all fell in love with the supposed story about this heroic sniper that is supposed to be based on a true story. Chris Kyle or whatever, but the true story is much different than. But is the true story? If you read Chris Kyle's book, which I am, and I'm just going by what other people have to say about this book. But I think I saw the excerpts or something. I trust what the people have to say about the book. He painted himself out as a cold-blooded killer in there. He was no hero, and he wasn't very remorseful. He had sociopathic qualities to him, or not qualities, but attributes to him. And by the way, I know that I think good old Vince is trying to call right now. He's called in at least one other show. Let me.
We don't have the phone lines.
Try to deal with this. He's on the phone lines.
No, we don't have the phone lines. Vince just informed me that we don't have the lines. Well, they were never forwarded.
That's weird. Why are the lines not forwarding to our call? That's weird.
I'm not sure. I actually just got another post from somebody else who was trying to call in, and they said the phone lines were unavailable. So I'm not sure why nothing's coming through.
I'm trying to think, because why wouldn't the calls be forwarded? It's odd. We're trying to fix that here, and I was wondering. I was like, wow, nobody's calling in. It's like this. They must be, just trying to listen or whatever. I was trying to think why did nobody call in tonight? Because they were trying to call in, they just couldn't. But
sorry about that. I don't know if it's my fault or what's going on.
I think I don't know what would be the deal, honestly, because
I thought it was weird that I wasn't getting any calls.
Yeah, because we do get all. I mean, this show, it's on and off. I mean, but I was thinking 2 weeks ago we didn't have a single caller for the entire show. But last week we had a few callers, and we usually get a few callers per show. At least some other people from UCY seem to call in. And I would think people would be calling in tonight, because it's a special show for Voice of Rebellion Radio in terms of new co-host here, and it's definitely, I think that it's kind of it's a new format kind of that we've been set for instead of I mean, I'm not going to talk too much smack tonight about my old co-host, but I'm just saying is that it is nice not to be interrupted a lot when you're trying to talk. Or the main pet peeve is that when you have a caller and not letting me address the caller, and you just do all the talking for me practically, and I don't even get to get my 2 cents out. I mean, that's one main thing. I like when there's a caller, I like to be able to address the callers. And be able, and if they're even if they're flat out wrong, I like to address them and teach them a lesson. Like what happened with the Ukraine show, there was kind of a debacle, mostly with the fact of during the Ukraine show we had the first two callers, and they were both a little bit out there. I mean, especially the first one. I mean, if you were. I don't know if you're just misinformed, but when it comes to that West Ukraine scenario, I know that's well off topic tonight, but it is. I guess it is on topic because we're talking about fascism. If you know what's going on there, you would not be supportive of West Ukraine in that situation where a neo-Nazi government has taken over Kiev and has now started a war against people trying to liberate themselves from this in East Ukraine, pro-Russian separatist movement. These people want to avoid the fact that not only do they wanted to ban the use of Russian in their country, but they also wanted to ban they were persecuting Russian people, so they didn't want to be persecuted. And then but this guy was supporting the oppressors in the situation, the Kiev government, and not only was he supporting the Kiev government, he was supporting the whole idea of Nazism in general. That seemed at least a little bit sympathetic. I could tell, and that a little bit of sympathy towards them was a little bit alarming. But in that case, I never even got to get my 2 cents on the guy. And get my 2 cents on him on that caller, and it was nice. It's nice to because I had many points to be able to at least see what I'm dealing with there. Because I would like to believe that some of these people that call in are misinformed, not the other thing being misinformed, not uninformed. Uninformed means that they're just ignorant of the situation. They just believe what they saw so far on CNN or some corporate medias, but misinformed means they just have a completely flawed mindset on a situation, and that's a lot harder to correct. From my personal experience, and not to say that again, I know sometimes I might be coming off like I'm the expert on all this stuff. It's like I have the 100% right opinion on everything. I'm not Alex Jones. I'm not that egotistic. I know that probably that's why I think that people should do their own research, because I'm probably not right on everything. There's probably a good 10% margin of error or so on some of these shows. I do like to believe that I've done adequate research on a lot of these topics. And this topic, I think I'm spot on this one, I would have to say. But, again, people should do their own research, because not only doing your own research is important for getting every bit of possible truth out there. But, it's important because, it just opens your mind, and you really feel it gets you excited about learning these different topics. And not only that, about learning the topics, but you get to find out about these topics that you might have never found out from me, even. I only go so far, it really seems like. It's not... I've talked about some stuff that made some of the top truthers aren't talking about. When you talk about unfortunately, the truther kings, they've been dubbed. And the truther kings, you know who are them, and those are Alex Jones, Mark Dice, or whatever, but that's a whole different story. It's like they're not just underinforming people. I think that Alex Jones, he's misinforming people, definitely. We have our own. We've had our own differences in InfoWars here on this program that I won't really get too far into right now.
Chris,
the
guy who wanted to call in just asked me to address the comparisons between Donald Trump and Hitler. wall building thing. Is there any opinions on the similarities between the two?
Wait, what was that? I couldn't hear you there for a sec.
Oh, the caller wanted to ask about the comparisons between Hitler and Donald Trump. Their plans to build a wall.
I see where it's going. Yeah, I think the it's not really about Hitler versus Donald Trump as a comparison. I think the whole system is very much comparable to the German system in the 30s and 40s. Because it doesn't matter if Trump's elected, if Bush is elected, there'll be very similar circumstances. I think that it will be very similar in many of these cases because they're all puppets of the same game. We have we don't get any real choices, and they make sure that they rig the primaries. People that have had tremendous amounts of support publicly, it does not reflect in the primaries. For example, let's go back to 2012. Mitt Romney didn't have that kind of public support. Ron Paul was very popular, but they showed him as fourth in the polls all the way through the primaries, which, Ron Paul probably was the rightful winner of the primaries in 2012. He probably would have a Ron Paul Obama, matchup, was more likely to happen. And I think even if the general election, if it came down to that, they would find a way to have rigged it if it really comes down to it. But really, what it looks like is that they make sure that it doesn't even come down to that. That your two choices are going to be somebody that goes with the elite agenda no matter what. But in 2012, I think was very indicative of what I was saying. It's indicative of because Mitt Romney literally admitted later that Ron Paul had, or that he had stolen the nomination from Ron Paul. He actually said that somewhere, so later on he admitted it. And, in 2008, a similar situation happened between Barack Obama and Mike Gravel. Mike Gravel was kind of an anti-establishment senator, and, older than Ron Paul. I mean, that's the thing, is that it seems like all these people that were truly represented the people, they're all from way back. Ron Paul was elected in the 70s. Gravel was from the 60s. And
I think you're seeing something. Sorry, I think you're seeing something a little similar with Bernie Sanders as well.
Seeing something similar in what?
With Bernie Sanders.
What? Seeing a similar thing between Bernie Sanders and who?
Well, I think you're seeing a similar thing to Ron Paul with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. I think Hillary will get it in the end, but I think Bernie's the one everybody's really supporting.
Well, I think that the only difference between Bernie and Ron Paul, though, is that Bernie Sanders, when it comes to foreign policy, does not differ much than Hillary Clinton or any of these other establishment politicians.
No, he does, other than on Israel. Israel's the one issue I think he's got it wrong on, but all his other stuff, I don't totally agree with him, but he's headed in the right direction.
Here's the thing, is that when it comes to Russia, he also was against Putin and painted him out as a bully, and many of these, and showed him as the aggressor in the Ukraine situation. Not like that's where I guess the West Ukraine topic will come into the show. The West Ukraine, it was really the Ukrainian coup that happened in 2014. The far right in Ukraine took over the government in Ukraine, and then with that, with United States support and also support from Israel, is that this new fascist government was propped up in Kiev, and now Russia supports a small group of separatists in East Ukraine that are trying to fight against this persecution. And the United States government tries to paint Putin falsely as the bad guy in this whole situation. Sanders did the same thing. Sanders in the foreign policy front is very similar to any establishment politician. Now, I think one thing that can be credited is that some ideas that wouldn't be, I don't know, I guess, some ideas that probably wouldn't originally have much talking about because of Sanders are now been brought more to the mainstream. Now, I think the ultimate test, if Bernie Sanders somehow gets through the primaries, that he was fake and he was picked all along to be, was picked all along to be one of the elite's choices, and at the end, but I think that eventually, Sanders, I think he's practically another establishment politician. I mean, he might have some, he might be good on some things, but it's like the same thing like Rand Paul. Rand Paul, he talked about liberty quite a bit in many. Not Ron Paul, but Rand Paul.
Rand had my support for a while and lost me this year. Over the course of the year, he's lost me.
Same thing happened to me. I mean, he had my support till last year, I would say. Then sometime when I saw his, how he supported Israel, and how he supported a more defense spending, which I thought was just absurd. Considering that this guy talks about
the nuke deal, that really threw me off.
Well, yeah, is that also to be against out of all the bad things that have happened in this presidency, one little tiny thing that's happened, it looks like decent, is the nuke deal, because at least as this, it will put off war for a little bit with Iran. That the establishment wants it eventually, but the alternative to the nuke deal is war now, practically. And that's what those Republicans and all the people in the Democrats and then those establishment politicians that said that the nuke deal was, a direct support for Iran. This is terrible. What they were pretty much saying is that we want to bomb Iran now. We don't want to wait. We don't want to have anything that ties us down. The only thing that makes me skeptical about this, though, is that the similar agreement was reached in 2002 with Iraq with their weapons of mass destruction. They had similar deals were signed, and then very quickly, Saddam supposedly broke the deal, and then then they said, "Oh, we need to go look for weapons of mass destruction, and now we're going to invade your country." So that's what I think is going to eventually happen with Iran, is that they're going to accuse them of a violation. I think who's going to eventually do that? I think that's going to happen in our next presidency. I think that in all reality, at the very end, after this whole charade with Donald Trump, I think it's going to. What this reminds me of is this is like the '92 election all over again. Was the storyline? You have a Clinton in there running as your Democrat, you have a Bush in there running as your Republican again, and then you have a wacky rich guy on the side, Donald Trump, like there was Ross Perot, that gets some support with a few good ideas, but then has some terrible ideas, including with his immigration, the wall, and then also his foreign policy. When he really gets into the foreign policy, he's against the Iran deal. He's against the, he differs on Putin. Sometimes he's
xenophobic. Xenophobic,
he's
militaristic, racist, bigoted.
Well, yeah, but what's the ironic thing about Donald Trump is that he had to skirt by immigration laws to bring his wife. One of his wives was from somewhere in Eastern Europe. I forget which country she was from. I forgot what was her name, but yeah. And he broke through immigration laws to get his wife over to the United States. And now he talks about immigration laws now. This is the exact hypocrisy about Donald Trump. And also another funny thing to point out is that, well, not funny, but a peculiar thing to point out about Donald Trump's rhetoric against Mexicans is that one of the accusations he said is that they're rapists, is that they apparently commit lots of rape, apparently. Donald Trump, even though he was never charged for rape, his wife accused him of rape, his ex-wife, but he later dropped it in a settlement after his divorce settlement. She dropped it. This happens in the late 80s, early 90s, this story. So Donald Trump is I think what he is, though, out of all, I think it's really kind of test slash. It does a couple purposes having Donald Trump for the elite, because one thing, they get to see how many Americans are on board with a complete whack job that's, that really is the symbol of everything that's wrong with America. And unfortunately, he enjoys about probably a third of this country's support. I mean, this guy goes out, especially when he gets down into the southern states, this guy gets rallies of tens of thousands of people so enthusiastic to see Donald Trump speak. Of course, one of the states that he gets a ton of support in, he goes to Alabama and he gets a huge amount of support. I mean, probably just the Mexican talk probably got them all riled up and supporting him. Also another thing he does is that it really just brings up, it's to a lot of Americans he's refreshing, because he's not super politically correct like the other politicians, and they say, oh wow, look at this guy, he's so different, he's a breath of fresh air, he's refreshing, it's a change. But in all reality, when it comes to his policies, it's no much different than the guy that he talks a lot of smack about. He tries to say, oh, I'm not Jeb Bush, people are not tuning into the debates to watch Jeb Bush, they're tuning in to watch me. But in all reality, he is very similar to Jeb Bush on what he thinks about foreign policy and many of the policies, even domestically. And he symbolizes just another. He's not an establishment politician because he's not from politics. I mean, this guy is just this guy is from business. It's a direct private sector to politics move. But you know what it is? It is a symbol about the corporate fascism in the United States that has happened. Because in corporate fascism, the businesses and states are so merged together, or business and state is so merged together that people can't really see the difference between, but it just becomes one entity. And people go between business and politics very easily. Like what happened with the FDA president. He worked on Monsanto as the VP. Now he is the head of the FDA. Trump is a person that really was just just another businessman a few months ago. Now he's running to become president. Bush, even the Bush family. I mean, Prescott Bush was a banker, which also should be noted, a Nazi financier. He financed Adolf Hitler with $3 billion worth of gold. And this guy got his bank actually seized, was trading with the enemy back in the 1940s. And then later he became, when he became a congressman. And then, of course, two of his grandsons one gets to become president. I bet one has a very good chance of winning 2016. His son becomes the head of the CIA, later the president in the 80s and 90s. Also worth noting that I just wanted to throw it out there. It was just connections that people don't even realize. H.W. Bush was in Dallas the day JFK was killed. In fact, there's a picture that looks like appears that he was walking down the steps of the Texas school book depository, just shortly after JFK was assassinated, which he was working in the CIA at the time. That was not very long, really, after he becomes the CIA director. And then he becomes goes into Congress, and then later I think he becomes the president of the United States later. And then very shortly after, his son gets to be president, and then it looks like the leader about to select another one of his sons to become president, or Hillary Clinton. I think that one of those two are going to definitely win 2016. And Hillary, again, she brings me back to the original topic. Talk about very draconian stances against weed. Something that's so, that's harmless. She has one of those draconian stances. If you think that medical marijuana and legal marijuana are going to be in this country after she's elected, you'd be wrong. Because once she's selected, she said she'd get rid of all the weed in this country. She'd probably force Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, those 4 states, to repeal their laws and to legalize weed completely in those states, and probably medical marijuana should make a strong push against, which is when, if you're against medical marijuana, what you're practically saying is I believe pharmaceutical companies are not rich enough as they are, which they, these people are, the people that run pharmaceutical companies are billionaires. Because here's the thing, marijuana can replace so many pills that they give to people, and a lot of these pills are dangerous, that people get addicted and they overdose on these pills that are given out by the pharmaceutical companies. Marijuana can replace these, but the pharmaceuticals are not going to have any. The pharmaceutical companies are not going to have any of this. They want to have a monopoly on the treatment of sick people, and it's not even really all they're doing is treating their symptoms, or sometimes they just give them more problems than they started off with the first place. I mean, you just ever watch one of those pharmaceutical commercials for some pill, and then it's just like, okay, this, like, it'll be something like, we're going to bring down your cholesterol, but your side effects might be, and then it just goes into some ridiculous thing. Well, the side effects include headaches, fever, infections. You might have swollen ball sacks. What? And just like there'll be something really crazy in there. It just keeps going. Diarrhea, vomiting, projectile vomiting. That is bleeding from random spots at any time. I mean, they'll just go for 20 different things for one relatively minor thing compared to the thing that the side effects are. I mean, that's another thing about weed, is that it does not have side effects. I mean, what's the side effects? Your throat might hurt for 15 minutes. Go drink a glass of water and you'll feel better. I mean, really. It's so minute compared to what it can do for people. I mean, this is literally a thing that scientists have proven, that it can cure 34 different kinds of cancer. 34 different kinds. I mean,
that's why it's illegal.
Not even 34 different kinds of cancer. It can cure, eye problems. It can cure mental problems. That's one that should be really brought up, because in the wake of many of these shootings that have happened recently, they all go back to these people's records, and they find out that a lot of these people were on pharmaceuticals. And that's something that they won't talk about, is that they won't talk about how they were on antipsychotic medications, the stuff that were supposed to treat their mental problems, but it seems to not have worked, because obviously they committed something that was obviously psychotic. But the truth is that a lot of these psychotic medications, the way that they work, it's a crapshoot practically. It's like it can either cure you or make you completely bonkers. Weed, with stuff like anxiety especially, would definitely cure for those people. And there's a lot of, it can even serious mental problems. People that are schizophrenic and stuff like that, they say that the study shows that they could actually help them out. Instead of the medicines that they have for those people, right now, that's the kind of medicines that drive people insane. I mean, these are the ones that they have this. Again, talk about side effects. The side effects are a worsening of the condition that they already have. I mean, it's absurd. How pharmaceuticals can make companies. They can make something that's so defective. It's a defective product, and yet people will continue to buy it, and they'll become richer. Some of the most richest companies on the planet. I mean, these people make. So they have tens of billions of dollars. Some of these CEOs for pharmaceutical companies. I mean, they are in the top bracket of rich people. I mean, the only way you can become richer is become a banker or something like that, and then you get to be the head of all rackets in the Western world. And I think that that's the funny thing about those bankers and stuff like that, is that you think they're just into banking, and they really just own everything. They have they own stuff that you wouldn't even think that they owned. For example, like the Rothschilds, they do banking, but they also own all kinds of patents and stuff like that. So they get to continue making money off of that. In their banking, of course, is the worst racket that the world sees that the world sees this day. I mean, it's been hundreds of years. They literally go back to the 1700s since their banking dynasty erupted. I mean, that's when they got huge. I mean, they were, for 500 years their banking enterprises started, and then the United States is really just one that, in comparison to what they've been doing, that it's a recent enterprise that they picked up. It was an important one. I think that was. Getting a little bit off time, but I like to make this example is that people think that that the British Empire is gone. The British Empire fell apart 100 years ago. All that happened is it got replaced. It got replaced by the United States. The United States became the British Empire, and it's the country that invades all the countries for the super rich and makes money for them. They're the revenue collectors for the super rich. The United States military has invaded 50-plus countries, something like that, 50-plus countries, include all the CIA operations as well, not just what the military has done since World War II.
Yeah, easily, and like you said, even more if you count CIA operations. But even more than that, whether you look at whether the corporate influence is immense. I mean, hold on, we have a caller.
Oh, cool.
This is through Skype, so let's see if Skype crashes.
I hope Skype doesn't crash, because that's happened to us a couple times.
It nearly happened twice during this show already.
And it is who I think it is. It's Vince.
Hey, Vince.
Hey, Vince.
Hey, brothers.
Wasn't kind of
you could,
Vince, we can't hear you, dude.
You're kind of cutting in and out. Oh no. Hey.
Okay, jump in. You could get a Skype call, and hey, welcome.
Vince, you're breaking up real bad, dude.
Yeah, like it was clear for like a sec there, and then I don't know. It may just
we lost him.
Yeah, I don't know. My internet connection is good.
I'm trying to pull him back in.
Yeah, I've noticed this before. Is that it's like I think this. It seems like when we're doing these calls, it's just like, oh, here we go. But sometimes it just disconnect really easily. He's back according to this. Somebody's back at least because we have another participant. Yeah, that's Vince. Hey, Vince.
Such connection. If I'm getting
still breaking up there, man.
Just
some connection's real bad. I don't know what's going on. It's just because he's on Skype or something like that. It's also, I mean, it's like it's showing. Show him still part of the group. I don't know.
Cut out.
Yeah, Vince, if you want to call back, maybe find somewhere where you have better internet connection. I don't think it's between us that the internet's bad. I think it's maybe your internet, or try calling back on the. Or wait, the phone's not being redirected to us. That's right. That sucks.
Sorry about that. I didn't know we had to get him redirected.
Well, that's not your fault. But I think that I think the deal was that is that it was somewhere at the central UCY. I don't know exactly why our phone calls didn't get reconnected to us. I think sometimes it may just did a glitch or something this time. Again, this is all like on computers and stuff like that. And the UCY gets it's kind of a little bit more involved than you think. Of keeping this network on the air as much as we are. I mean, we're on the air as the whole network as a whole. It's also like all but like 4 hours a day. It's like 20 hours a day. All 7 days a week. I mean, even after this show on a Sunday night, we get to it goes all the way to 1 in the morning Eastern time. What's the next show? and then it only takes a 4-hour break, and then 4 hours later there'll be a show at 5 in the morning Eastern. So it's kind of hard to keep a network online that much without facing some problems. I think Vince is trying to congratulate you for joining UCY, which I think it's I think it's kind of weird actually. Thinking about what the show actually represents is that this is the young truthers right here. I mean, this is people. Neither of us are 20 even. Mine, we're not. I mean, it's kind of weird to actually work with somebody that's actually younger than I am. I mean, usually I'm considered the youngest one in this truther movement.
And there are a couple even younger than us.
Yeah, it's good. It's the youth are the vanguard to revolution. Vanguard meaning we're the deciding force. If the young people rise up, that's what's going to take. It's not going to be. Yes, the older generations help, and it's a general collective effort against the government. However, the young people need to rise up and wake up, and I think that it's good to see at least some of us are woken up, because it didn't look kind of bleak from what I have seen. It looks bleak because of what they're distracted by.
Yeah. That's a topic I think that would be worth talking about, Chris. Our experiences with the rest of the generation.
Oh, that would be an interesting show. But I can imagine some of the stories I could bring up.
I have a bunch too, man. That could be fun.
Facebook. I remember one time though. I'll just bring up one now. Instead, I was on Facebook, and we got into there was me, a few other people there in the truther movement. This is 2 years ago. We used to get into these giant debates quite a bit, and then we were just there was this a 16-year-old blonde girl that was trying to say it's you guys are crazy. It's you guys are a bunch of creeps, all debating, all trying to tell me all this stuff. It's all a bunch of conspiracy theorist stuff, and you guys are all liars and stuff like that. And then she started. She didn't. By the end of the argument, she had lost so bad. She was like, "Oh, look at our wonderful president, Barack Obama." And I just was shaking my head. I was like, "Well, it's you've lost at this point. You're not even trying to prove us wrong. You're just trying to say that you are so brainwashed that you're not going to change your opinion no matter how much truth we spit at you."
Dude, my history class will provide you hours of entertainment.
Yeah, it might have to be a 2-part show with all the stories we would have. I mean, I've had. It seems like when it comes to what happened in my last history class in high school, or social studies, it was U.S. government / econ. I got so many debates. I actually woke up a couple students, I think, to kind of what's going on in there, because it was me and the teacher a lot of times. Me and the teacher would go at it a lot about he would be always trying to defend this crappy system and trying to say, oh, it's not as bad as you make it seem like. Oh, it's not. The Federal Reserve is not that bad. I mean, they're just he actually tried to make it seem like that the Federal Reserve is here to prevent inflation, which is very comical when you actually know what's happened with the Federal Reserve in the last 102 years. I mean, it's just been. It's all been
okay. Is this any better? I mean, I got signed in on my phone now.
That's much
it's better. It's a lot clearer.
That's what I thought. It's this POC computer that I got. It's got 2 whatever it is for operating system. Anyways, it's junk. So anyways, I wasn't able to sign in first. I just wanted to do a little test and welcome Dylan to UCY. Awesome, Chris. This guy's great, man. I've been listening to Dylan for a long time. I think this is a good positive direction. So anyways, I just wanted to call in and say howdy and welcome and to test the lines out. And we don't have phones, so get it set for next week. This is a transition period.
Yep, I do apologize to everybody for not having the phone lines ready. They will be here next time. This is my first time producing, period. So this is a completely new thing to me.
Don't worry, Dylan. It always has a chance of going south. So with that, welcome and goodbye, and howdy to everybody in chat. Love and peace, y'all.
Thank you, Vince.
Thanks, man. No, it's cool though. Yeah, and definitely with the new coast and things, I think that it's a definitely move. Again, I think this is a way. This is a more positive way of doing radio. I think that we have. It's definitely got it's got to bring a new perspective. So such a young show that we have here. It's like my former co-host was younger, but not quite as young as Dylan here. I mean, he was he was like 30, and Dylan's almost half his age. But I think this is gonna. I think that definitely what this show could be is definitely we could be more entertaining, and we could market this out to the younger listeners that really because actually I think that I've gotten the attention of some of the younger people around the area. I mean, again, it's like I said, it's like I had all these bad experiences with the younger generation, but I had some good experiences. It's like the few friends that I have out of I don't have many friends in this generation. But there's a few of them, and they seem to mostly agree with what I have to say about politics now. So it's like really the ones that were debating me constant. They weren't even debating me; they were just calling me names and stuff like that. I really learned pretty quickly. I mean, some of them just jumped ship, that they didn't want to be associated with me, and then that's how I know I didn't want to be associated with them. I didn't, you learn your true friends here in the Truther movement. Your true friends might not be the people you think were your true friends. I mean, Truther movement. I mean, I've known some of these people for just a few weeks, and I knew that they would be good friends. And then there's people that I had known outside of the Truther movement. I'd known outside for years, literally, and I lost them as friends as soon as I started becoming I was already kind of an activist before I really started doing what I had done on Facebook around 2 years ago. But, when I got serious about this, well, the friends that I had met outside the Truther movement, a lot of them just jumped ship. And I think that, I think one thing is that I think some of the people have these, they have the ideas already in their head, but they don't know exactly what to do with them. Some people, they know that the government is, the U.S. government is just a crock of shit at this point. Their media is the same thing as a crock of shit, and we need. But they don't know that it's right. It's just that basic stage. Some people they need to be. This could be the show that expands their knowledge a little bit, and it also makes it realize that they're not alone in this. They're not the only people that think the same way they do. Because I think I kind of remember that. When I knew this stuff, I was kind of worried what would happen if I started saying this stuff. I mean, I was like thinking that it wouldn't lead to any good, but I think it's led to a lot of good in my life because I don't know what kind of friends I would still be hanging out with if I had been just stayed silent. It's like what I mean by that is I might just had people that weren't true friends. The few ones I have now, I have a good feeling that these are a lot better chance of staying legitimate friends. Rather than the people before were just fair weather friends. What I mean by that is that they'll just be your friends because it's because it doesn't hurt them in any way. It's their image of what it's all about the image nowadays. It's like you don't. People are afraid to talk out because they are afraid that they'll be deemed crazy by the rest of the generation, and that's why again some of the people that don't, that's part of the reason why some of the people that know don't talk up. They're afraid of the consequences. And I think, they're afraid the consequences. I mean, really, they're minute when you really think about it. They're temporary. I mean, they seem bad at the moment, but now that we're looking back at it, look at us now. I mean, we are I mean, how many people our generation get to say that they get to do this every Sunday? I mean, we get to join on such a cool network, and we get to join on such a cool show, and it's not just like it's not like what people might think. It's like, oh, you have an internet radio show, you must enjoy the 3 listeners you have. Yeah, 3 listeners. How about trying maybe 300 listeners? That might be more closer to the actual number we actually get a week. At UCY. So, it's like, to any people that doubt, that this is actually reaching out to anybody, and especially the people, people that think they might have a chance at this, try it out. I mean, you probably will start off with about 3 listeners. It's true. The early starts are usually a bit humble, but, you'll eventually get to the point where you actually will get your voice heard out there. And I think, again, it's kind of weird, it's like we're almost talking from, like, experience, like we've had this career for a while, but really this has only been 1 or 2 years for both of us. There's been people on here that have been, on this internet radio activist circle for 15 years and stuff like that. They've been here since the practically the beginning of this popping up. Now we've been here 1 or 2 years, and we kind of talk like from a lot of experience. But I think for some people, you get a lot of experience, from the different things that happen in a short time. But I realized we're down the last 14 minutes already.
Man, this actually flew by a lot quicker than it usually does.
Yeah, I know. I even know. I don't want to. I'm not making fun of you here, but I think I remember you were a little bit more awkward back when we would at NWO Truth Radio. I think you just were not as comfortable back there, and those 2 hours this 2.5 hours did go by a little bit slower probably for you back then. And this, that's what we used to do was 8:30. It was kind of weird. It was 8:30 Wednesday nights, and then I think you were on maybe 1 or 2 shows with me, and then and now it's only this is only 2 hours, by the way, Dylan. That's the set time. We don't go into overtime or anything like that, because if somebody comes on right after this show, and then again, it's like it's just constant shows. I mean, there's so many different people on this network. It's kind of crazy. I mean, it's not like one of the smaller networks where it's maybe 10 different people together at the whole network. This is 50 plus people work at this network. I wanted to point out put out one last point out there before the end of the show. We only have a few minutes left. Is that look at this private prison complex? I mean, it's not just a thing in the United States; it's a thing around the world, really. I mean, it's around the world, and the countries that it seems like the United States aligned with themselves with is that that Israel has a similar thing with that. It's not really they made Gaza their prison. The people of Gaza that they and the Palestinian people they're the rightful owners of the land, but they've been practically put into walled-in small territories of land. You have to realize that the whole place is the size of Connecticut, and that they've walled them into little tiny sections of that Connecticut. It's a very small area that they can move through, and then what they do is that they start, then the settlers try to take up that little piece of the land. So they have just practically starts getting to the point where just have a few miles by spaces that the Palestinians actually have any bit of ownership to, and that can be bombed at any point. But what they do is that then they put enterprises like SodaStream in the settler land. There's actually quite a bit of industry on the settlements that the settlers, which I don't. The settlers is such a. It's too calm of a word for what it is. It should be called the usurpers, the stealers of this land, because this is not like they're taking land that nobody owned before. It's a Palestinian land. These are Palestinian people's houses. In fact, the bad thing about it is that if it's so racially based. It's not. Israel was formed by people that were not even religiously Jewish. They were just ethnically Jewish, and because they thought Jewish blood was superior. And it sounds very close to somebody that was around in the 30s in Germany. And the same mentality they have now is that people that have Jewish blood are superior to everybody else, and they believe that they can just kick out, the Palestinians and give it to people that are not from anywhere nearby. If you have just a quarter Jewish blood, you can become a settler, meaning a stealer, and you can become a total scumbag, show up in Israel, get a free house and everything that was stolen from a Palestinian, and get to live in guilty luxury, I would say. Because I don't know how you could actually live with a clear conscience, knowing that probably some family of 6 people got kicked out of that house and are now living on the street somewhere in 110-degree heat, while you get to sit in air conditioning and get to swim in your pool from a house that you stole. And while that all happens, there's a few Israeli profiteers that get to make profit off of the businesses that they're building off this ex-Palestinian land, like SodaStream, they're not even Israeli owned, they're just a business that uses that opportunistic labor that can be found on the settlements in the Palestinian land. But going back to the whole mentality again, is that the settlement, they don't have any respect for the Palestinian land, because they'll give it to people that have no connection to the Middle East whatsoever. These people, their grandfather was a Polish Jew or something like that, and that means that they're Christian, but because they have that grandfather as a Polish Jew, they are allowed to go to Israel or Palestine, but now it's Israeli land, and now show up and take their property. And so it's kind of like, it's kind of like what happened, to the Native Americans here in the United States, is that they're the rightful owners of the land, but yet they have a very tiny section of all the land in the United States, just like the Palestinians have happened. The Palestinians have they've had it happen in only 70 years, meaning that there's people that are 90 that clearly remember when it was Palestine and lived all the way up into their adulthood as Palestinians, and all of a sudden, when they were in their 20s, around then, Israel showed up and said that mass amounts of this is our land, just because of something that happened in Germany, and also it's not. Never mind. I'm not going to go into the whole connection. It's really a bizarre chapter of history when you look about that there was actually. People think that Zionism and Nazism would be very different, but the reality is that there was actually a collusion, and that collusion is actually shown in history. But it's 8 minutes left, and there's no way I can go into all that in such a short time. But I'll just say is that but going back to what I was saying is that they used that excuse is that they were displaced there, so they needed to go to their homeland because of displacement in Europe, and they go to their homeland. But the only thing is that, again, the people that took over, that made Israel possible, they were not even religiously Jewish. So they said that a God that they didn't believe in promised them land from a already settled place. What? What kind of logic is that exactly? It's the logic of people just looking for any excuse to justify the stealing of an entire country, Palestine. Which, yes, at the time was still a dependency of Britain, because Britain had taken it over after World War I, and and they made it a dependency for 25 years or so. But at the time, they were in the middle of a civil war, where Britain and Israel had teamed up already. The British government supported the Israelis taking the land, even though the Palestinians were the rightful owners. And so the Israelis started a civil war with the Palestinian people, and then and the thing is that these Zionists that were in the Israeli state, they were terror groups, and they committed acts of terror. Look up the King David Hotel bombing, and they didn't even hide it. Usually terrorists don't call themselves terrorists, but they called themselves terrorists, and they were there was 3 of them was Hebrew names that I forgot at this point. I just know the one, Lehi, which there was one that was actually, weirdly enough, was actually pro-Nazi Germany because they wanted the British out immediately, and they thought the Germans is a good alternative to the British. Again, that's a very complicated story that only really a 2-hour show could probably somewhat explain. It is very, very complicated, that whole chapter of history. And again, that's a prison in its own right there, and it's worse than a prison. That is, and that's where your taxpayer money is going to keep the Palestinians kept in an open-air prison where they get worse than prison treatment, because at least in prison you get food and water. They don't get food and water. They get locked away practically behind a wall larger than the Berlin Wall by far. This is a 70-foot wall or something like that, the apartheid wall. They call it the separation wall, but I call it the apartheid wall, because that is the wall that separates the chosen people, as the Israelis believe it, and the non-chosen people that they stole the land from, but they don't have any remorse about it because they're chosen and they're not chosen, so that means that they get to, they feel entitled, that makes them immediately entitled. Again, it's the Israeli settlement. It's funny that Christians, Zionists in America actually support Israel because they don't realize how they'd actually be treated once they're there. Christian Zionists from America would be still seen as lower than the actual Israeli people once they're there, even if they gave their full support, because they are not of Jewish blood. And if you're not of Jewish blood to the Israeli government, then you are inferior.
Chris, we're down to 4 minutes.
I was about to say that. We're done only. Yeah, actually, it's actually like 3 minutes, because at about 10:59, like once we reach the top of the minute, 10:59, it goes to, we have our little.
Do you have bumper music
song
at the end?
Yeah, we have another Immortal Technique song at the end. That was the one at the beginning was Immortal Technique, Rich Man's World, and then Point of No Return by Immortal Technique is our song at the end. It was pretty cool. It was usually, a musician of that size we don't get music from, or we wouldn't be allowed to use music from on UCY, but we actually were allowed, given special permission from Immortal Technique directly. So we get to use Immortal Technique's music here at UCY, here at UCY, this Voice of Rebellion program. We're in the last minute or two, so again, it's been a great show, and thanks, Vince, for, even though it was only a minute, called in, and hopefully next time we get the phones back working, and then we're going to have, again, computers glitch out a lot, so, well, not a lot, but, every now and then it is very hard to keep this whole thing on air all the time and everything working.
Yeah, my Skype nearly crashed twice during the broadcast.
Yeah, we had the Skype crash a few times here on UCY, and again, but it was great having you on, the new co-host Dylan Wade, and we're in the last minute. I'm going to thank everybody for tuning in. Next time we'll have callers, and it will be Labor Day weekend next week. Maybe we'll make some kind of special show for Labor Day weekend. Since and probably be more people tuning in. A lot more people will tune in when they know there's not work tomorrow, because I know our show goes a little bit late for a Sunday. Yeah, it's pretty late for a Sunday. That's 11 o'clock here on the East Coast. But again, thanks everybody. It should be just a few seconds away, and we're going to be heading out of here.
One and no return, and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little, when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights, when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds him. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can